So without further ado, without further to do, without further introduction, everybody share the link. It's going to be awesome. Catherine, when you are ready to come in, unmute, unmic, uncamera, and let's
Here I
get
am.
this on. Catherine, so we've never met until 5 minutes ago. As far as I know, we never met in Ottawa at any point over the trucker protest.
No, we didn't. No.
All right. If you may be so kind, I ordinarily I would have done more homework, but there was not even enough time in the day to do the homework that I would ordinarily do. But I think I have a sufficient understanding of this. But just explain who you are to those who are meeting you for the first time.
Sure. So I am a lawyer that has always represented military and veterans up here in Canada, and for 10 years now. And mainly did a lot of family law, but in October of 21, when the Canadian Armed Forces brought in their mandate for the COVID vaccine, I had thousands of members reach out to me to see if there was any legal way to get around it, what was happening. And I said to them, well, you know what? I'm willing to try if you're willing to trust me to try. And away we went. And we've ended up filing 2 mass torts for abuse of power related to the mandates. There are judicial reviews of grievances that were filed over the mandates. And we are now working on a class action for vaccine injury, which is kind of where I was talking to your brother about it, because it's quite a story about what's happened to our military members who were willing to take the jab and then were injured in it. And the ones who died, it's even a worse story.
And we don't need to worry about like censoring any words here. I call it the jab because it's not a vaccine as far as I'm concerned. Never was, never will be.
Agreed. Although I did have the Attorney General lawyer accuse me of being a conspiracy theorist in court in September for calling it
well,
than a vaccine.
At the risk of violating my one-day-old resolution to not swear anymore, at the risk of telling them to go F themselves, it never was a vaccine.
No.
Even under what we might say the new definition, and I believe it was Dr. Kieran Moore who accidentally said that at one point during one of his pressers. What city do you operate out of?
I operate out of St. Albert, which is just bordering up against Edmonton. So I'm right outside the gates of CFB Edmonton.
Okay, very cool. And what type of law did you practice, and how long have you been a lawyer for?
I've been a lawyer for 10 years, and I've always practiced with military and veterans. And in October of 2021, I became a constitutional and civil litigation lawyer. I basically retaught myself everything that I'd learned in order to help out these thousands of members who came to me for help.
Okay,
they were told by other lawyers who had been JAG officers and were in private practice, you were given an order, follow it. And I have a nursing background before I was in law, and I'm thinking, where's the informed consent? You can't force anybody to take medical treatment. All this was going through my head, where they still have their rights, even though they wear a uniform. And so, yeah, I was more than happy to take it on.
Incredible. So you had not done constitutional law until these cases came about. How did you get the first of the, I would say, Canadian Armed Forces? How did you get, do I say soldier? I can say soldier as a general term, right? How did you get the first one?
Because I was well known in the military community for my legal work that I had already done, and I'd already done some work for some veterans. They knew my name, so they reached out to me, and it was over. I was prepared to tell them you can't sue the Crown, that there's nowhere to go, and then they started sending me their stories. And each story, one was worse after the other. And I was like, I got to find a way to do this. And I knew I couldn't get into court with a COVID lawsuit, that was just going to be a no-go in Canada. So we came up with a strategy to bring it in as an abuse of power, that the Chief of Defense Staff overstepped his boundaries legally. It was an unlawful order, and we went after them that way. We're now in an appeal.
Okay, and I'm going to ask, I might ask a bunch of stupid questions, so forgive me. Is this in federal court or is this in military court?
It's in federal court.
Okay.
And that's where we have to bring
by the way, my brother's going to pop in here. My brother, Lion Advocacy, Dan, there he is, who's also a lawyer in Ontario. Okay, so you're doing this in federal court.
Mm-hmm.
Now, a mass tort, it's different than a class action?
Yes. So each plaintiff their case has to stand on their own. So instead of bringing 458 lawsuits, we've grouped them into 2 lawsuits. One's 330 and one's 128. And We've condensed them so that we're bringing it as a package, different than a class action, which would be a representative plaintiff or plaintiffs, and then people would sign on. So
It's interesting. I'm not sure that I'm familiar with the mass tort mechanism and how it's different. Everybody's got individualized claims,
yes,
but similar fact patterns.
yes,
And
yeah,
so you're able to categorize them based on the fact patterns, but the claims themselves are going to, or the claims for damages are going to be different. The injuries are going to be different.
right.
Okay. Does
So
it?
the vaccine injury lawsuit is going to be a class action, just because of the numbers are going to be high. So, but the abuse of power one, they wanted to do a mass tort. So,
Dan, introduce yourself also for the crowd.
Oh, hey, good to see everybody. I'm Lion Advocacy on X, lawyer up here in Toronto, but I've taken to X to advocate against some of the stuff I saw during COVID.
All right. So Catherine, so they come to you, they say, I've got injuries from the jab. And you don't want to take a COVID injury law claim against the government. They've been tossed already as relates to Dan Hartman and the claim for his son, Sean Hartman, at least against the government. I don't think Kayla Pollux has been adjudicated as relates to the government. You say, I don't want to do that.
See, here's what makes it so unique. You can't group the Canadian Armed Forces troops into any other lawsuit. They have a completely unique system. They have two sets of laws that apply to them. They've got the laws that apply to every Canadian, but then they have all the laws that apply to them for being military. And so for a veteran, for a soldier that's hurt, say they've been told to take a hill and he loses his leg, he has to go to Veterans Affairs, and Veterans Affairs then decides if they're going to compensate him if his injury is related to service, if they're going to compensate him. And if they turn him down and say, no, it's not related to service, then he can appeal through the Bureau of Pension Advocates. And if he loses that appeal, then he can go into the federal court to pursue a claim for injury. So what's happened with the vaccine injury cases is they're getting to Veterans Affairs and they're saying, well, I was ordered to take this jab and now I've been injured by it and I want to be compensated for it because careers were ended. People have died from it in the armed forces. And what they're being told by Veterans Affairs is it's not service related, even though it was an order to take it.
Let me ask you this. I know a number, I've never served, but I know a number of servicemen and women in America. Like, is this different than with any other vaccine? And I use the word that they're forced to take. Like, if they get injured by the anthrax vaccine in the course of their duties, I presume they get compensated for that because I believe I know people who.
There's the catch. And so we went looking. I have a brilliant ATIP team. We have 1 million pages of corruption evidence against the Canadian Armed Forces right now. But we went looking for what happened with vaccines. And in 2021, there was a backroom conversation between the Canadian Armed Forces and Veterans Affairs. And they decided that Veterans Affairs was never going to cover a vaccine injury again.
Sorry, if I may, in 2021 specifically,
2021,
which means that they had hitherto covered vaccine injury.
Yeah.
For things like anthrax, malaria.
Yeah, Catherine, could that be because they punted it over to the VISP, the Vaccine Injury Support Program?
And that's exactly what they decided they were going to do. But they didn't tell anyone in the Canadian Armed Forces that that's what they were going to do. And everyone only found out after the 3-year limitation period was up to apply to the Vaccine Injury Support Program. So what we've got are injured veterans who are being denied any type of coverage for any type of injury.
Hold on. I actually don't understand why they would be punted to the VISP, which is the Vaccine Injury Support Program. Hypothetically, if they had gotten an anthrax vaccine injury in the course of their duties, they wouldn't go to the VISP anyhow. Is that wrong?
They shouldn't be going, no. Any injury related to their service should be handled by Veterans Affairs.
And so in 2021, with the creation of the VISP, which was done very, very quietly, as my brother learned and pointed out, that's when they decide any vaccine injury from a serviceman or woman would go to the VISP. If it's anthrax, malaria, smallpox, whatever, Ebola, whatever.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's very subtle language, and they didn't tell anybody that that's what it was. It was only by us doing an ATIP and discovering this conversation, and then we looked at the dates, and by the time we got the ATIP back, the 3-year window was closed.
What's an ATIP?
access to information request.
Okay.
And by the way, the reason they probably, I'm just assuming, is for the same reason they didn't advertise the vaccine injury support program from day one, which is because as soon as you start advertising it or making it known, people start to ask more questions. Like, why is there? I went to the board of governors of the Western University in 2022, late 2022. They didn't know about the vaccine injury support program.
Mm-hmm.
This was the well-kept secret. Why? Informed consent. It was all about making sure people didn't have all the information, because if they did, they'd poke around.
Well, and for military members, their claims for an injury related to service is for life. There's no limitation period for them to make the initial claim and to appeal it. So it wouldn't even enter their mind that there might be a 3-year limit to claim an injury. Keep in mind also that military doctors were told not to report vaccine injuries. They were told to write it up as something else. So
You have an Egypt?
Prove an injury either.
Wow.
Even as they're going for open heart surgeries and aneurysm surgeries, and they're having strokes and they're getting cancer, and
how many servicemen and women have been injured by the jab?
I would love to tell you, but I can't get the exact stats. But just from people who have contacted my office, we're looking at about 8%.
8% of
military members. Yeah.
You would assume that number would be a commensurate or correlative to the general population, unless they were getting a different iteration of the jab.
Most of them, I would say 99% of them, their only option, the only authorized option, was Moderna.
Okay.
Even after it was discontinued elsewhere, our military kept giving them Moderna.
All to save a few bucks. Well, up until when was that? I did not know that, Catherine.
Yeah. And our hardest hit, the most deaths and the worst injuries were special forces, pilots, and search and rescue. So our strongest, healthiest troops were the most severely injured.
I'm trying to connect two dots here, because this, Trudeau announced the Moderna mega facility in Laval, outside of Montreal. Mm-hmm. As of when and until when were they being required to take the Moderna?
It continues today, and from when Moderna was first brought out in December 2020, and then the mandate was in October of 21.
Why Moderna over Pfizer? That was
the only option they were given. And if they asked to do a different one, only rarely would a commanding officer authorize them to go and get Pfizer or Johnson & Johnson.
What percentage of servicemen and women got the jab? All of those who remain, obviously.
Well, 98%. Or sorry, 96%. There were 4% that didn't take it.
And then they were dishonorably discharged or released.
Yeah, it was a real gong show.
Sorry, Catherine, does that mean 4%? Is that including the religious or religious or medical exemptions in that 4%?
Yeah, there were only 152, somewhere in the 150s religious exemptions accepted.
Who got the religious exemptions, if I may ask? Demographic, race, religion?
Demographically, they tended to be a colonel or higher.
Okay, no specific race, religion, or creed.
Yeah, no specific. Well, the chaplain general came out with a list of religions that he considered acceptable religions in the Canadian Armed Forces.
What were those, if we can ask?
Well, they were, the Jewish one was the Orthodox, Catholic, Roman Catholic, some of the Christian denominations. Pagan was accepted.
Wow.
Yeah, but
not carte blanche. You would still have to apply within those sects or whatever religion.
But disproportionately higher ranked were given the exemptions.
Yes,
as if they had the connections and they had the information,
or they're just more religious generally, and that's how they get.
Yeah,
I don't.
Well, they've been saying a lot more prayers since my lawsuit started in Ottawa.
Holy hell! Wow. Okay, so how many individual clients do you have between these two mass torts?
The mass torts for abuse of power, it started at 330. 51 decided not to go forward with appeal. So we're looking at 279. And then the other one is 152 people.
All right. So they come to you.
And then Vaccine injured, we've got a couple hundred. We're picking out the best ones to do the class action on that one. And
Someone,
I'm waiting for the appeals with Veterans Affairs to finish.
okay, so
because
someone had asked how you got to the 8%. Is that how do you know that it's give or take 8%?
Just because of what CAV is willing to release, what we've picked up in ATIPs, and the pipeline that I have to just about every corner of the Canadian Armed Forces, pulling out people who's been injured, who's seeing people injured at work or released injured, people who have died. We have quite a list of sudden deaths of young, healthy.
By the way, something worth pointing out is that when it gets punted over to the VISP, their standards of causation and injury threshold is, I would expect, I think it's significantly higher than had it been dealt with by within Veterans Affairs. So that also may be a reason. So you're going to see a lot more, I think, prejudice or harm against.
But it pays less than Veterans Affairs would.
It pays less as well.
Yeah,
Okay,
because
so
if a veteran's injured to a capacity of, say, 100%, then he's getting a lot of his salary for the rest of his life.
Procedurally, how does this start? They come to you and they say, I'm injured.
Mm-hmm.
And then you go to Veterans Affairs and ask for an assessment to determine what, if anything, VA is going to cover.
Right. Yeah. So they submit a claim.
Okay. How long is to submit the claim? How long does it take to submit it? And then how long does VA have to adjudicate on the claim?
They don't have a limit. And some cases, some people have been waiting a couple of years.
Okay, that's.
And then if that gets rejected, then they have to go to an appeal. And the Bureau of Pension Advocates is so overwhelmed that they're looking at a year before their appeal is going to be heard.
And the appeal is an administrative appeal within Veterans Affairs. It's not at the court level.
No.
Okay. Then hypothetically, because these are administrative bodies, the appeal gets denied. You've got to ask for the court authorization to review the decision, which is administrative, and they're going to be very deferential and say, did they grossly abuse of their administrative power in coming to their decision? That's what the court would do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. The federal court is very sympathetic to the Chief of Defense Staff and the Canadian Armed Forces.
And in order for the Canadian court to do that, you got to petition the courts, go through the process, and the federal courts, I presume they have 6 months to render their judgment, like provincial courts. Maybe I'm wrong, but there's that whole process, which can take a year or more.
I wish it was 6 months.
And by the way, you're up an uphill battle, at least at the federal court level. You got to get to the Court of Appeal. Federal court broadcasted their vaccination status in September of 2021, right before the election. So if you really want impartiality,
Court of Appeal refused to. So I'm looking forward to doing. I've got 3 or 4 appeals before them coming up, and I'm looking forward to seeing how they handle it. So
and now let me ask you this: in order to even make the claim at the VISP, do armed force members have to go through this whole process, or do they now say skip Veterans Affairs, skip that adjudicative administrative process, you go straight to VISP?
They're being told, well, you're being denied for Veterans Affairs because you should have gone to VISP.
That's what they're currently being told by.
That's what they're being told.
They're being told that by VISP.
By the way, it's been more than 3 years, so you can't make that claim. Sorry.
And having gone through the process does not itself toll prescription in this case? Like having gone through the administrative process typically would suspend prescription or pause it?
Nope.
It might not be the good time to bring this. I'm bringing it up because it's on. I mean, Canadian Commando says they killed my brother and broke my heart, and I will never forgive them. Mm-hmm. And then, in addition to that, they basically say you're SOL. If you even are within, if you have a claim now, go to the VISP, and good luck with the VISP. Although they deny black and white cases like Sean Hartman, who has medical evidence to support the claim. Mm-hmm. So you're representing hundreds of people now who went through this whole process, went to VA, went to appeal, went to the courts, and now they went to VISP and they're told for whatever they would get, capped at, Dan, what is it? Capped at $250,000?
I think it's around that. I think
250,000 Canadian. They're then told, sorry, you are literally shit out of luck.
Yeah, you're out of time.
Now, Catherine, isn't there also, if a new injury is discovered within that 3 years or at any point, really, you can always go back, or if the thing gets worse, isn't there some opportunity there to reapply?
I think so. Yeah, I'm not as familiar with VISP as I am with BAC.
So what stage are you at of the court system? So now you get denied. They get denied from VISP, and they say you're really out of luck. And what do you do now? Like,
So then we start preparing a class action and try to force FAC to take the claims back, because then there's no limitation. Yeah.
and I just I got to understand this, Dan. Sorry, we get to the Veterans Affairs told you, sorry, we no longer have jurisdiction over this as of 2021.
Yep.
I don't think people realize what this means in terms of compensation for injury. I didn't realize this. It means they basically pull the wool from under their feet.
Yeah.
Because when you're going in, and it's the same with true to an extent when people are applying for a new job, they're not covered by WSIB. So if they take that vaccine for a job that they need, you're not getting insured from workers WSIB.
What's WSIB?
Worker Safety Insurance Board in Ontario. So it's like it's you're not getting it because but a vaccine for soldiers is different, because there it's like part of the argument was that you needed it to serve in different jurisdictions or like certain countries, right? Like you needed it.
Well, the interesting thing is that under the National Defense Act, Section 126, the Chief of Defense Staff has the authority, the legal authority, to order a vaccine for any member. They didn't do that. They went administratively, because if the catch-all with the 126 is that if you don't get it, you're charged, and then you have to go through a court-martial. And if the judge decides that you had a reasonable excuse not to take it, you're acquitted. And the JAG Corps couldn't handle 3,000. I had 3,000 people objecting to this vaccine in October of 21. They couldn't handle 3,000 courts-martial. And they didn't want to set the precedent that you could say no, because these people were being told, you don't have any rights. When you signed up, you gave up all your rights. You do what you're told. You cannot ask any questions. Line up and take the jab.
Unlimited liability, isn't that the principle?
Yeah, you signed on for it, but they didn't, because they didn't give up their rights as a Canadian citizen.
Let me ask you this: when did Veterans Affairs tell the soldiers that they had to go to the VISP?
When people started making claims about a year ago.
Why didn't they tell them since 2021?
Good question. I look forward to finding out the answer to that.
Has no one's?
I think I answered that earlier.
No, but has no one even offered an explanation? Like, oh, we didn't know, or have they been asked?
They've been asked, yeah, and they tried to deny it. But when we did the ATIP, when we pulled up all the emails where they're discussing it between Canadian Armed Forces and Veterans Affairs, that's where we discovered, oh, look, this was planned. Because when my vaccine injured people, I said, okay, you got to go through the Veterans Affairs process. We have to do that first. And they would get back to me and they'd say, well, I'm completely incapacitated. I've had open heart surgery twice. I can't work anymore. And they told me it's not service related and I've been denied. And I'm like, what? Like, what? How? It's either a legal order and someone got injured following that order, so that's service related, or if it's not a legal order because it's not service related, then they got to answer that question in the other lawsuit. They're trying to play it both ways.
But I'm looking at this from a fraud angle, because if the Veterans Affairs knew or ought to have known, they're jerking you along so that you let the prescription period lapse.
Yeah.
Entertaining a claim that they knew they didn't have jurisdiction for throughout the process. And then by the time they tell you, oh, we've denied it, but you should go to VISP, but it's too late because we've jerked you around for the last 2+ years.
Mm-hmm.
And this is what does they call it? Haslin's razor? Was it incompetence, or was there, you put on your conspiracy theory hat here, was there something so off the charts here? And so one of the somebody put this on Twitter about how if there were bad batches that were sabotaged and there was an intentional infliction of injury on certain soldiers over others, and they commanded this on everybody, like how would you have caught that sabotage, that act of sabotage on certain members of the armed forces? Mm-hmm. Like, what's to say?
That's a good question, because they're refusing to disclose medical records of members who have died since 2021, even to the families. I'm representing families that want those medical records, and that would have vaccine batches, etc. They won't give them up. They're fighting it hard.
I was just going to ask you that question. You don't yet have the batch numbers of the vaccines for the injured injured soldiers that you're representing?
Nope. No.
What it's not even, it would be comical if it were a movie and no one would believe it. It would be believable if we thought we were talking about like a corrupt Eastern Bloc country or a developing nation where you would expect this, or at least wouldn't be shocked by it. This is Canada, and the Veterans Affairs are not, or the military, Canadian Armed Forces, they are not giving you the information as to what the batch numbers were on the very jabs that your clients who are veteran or who are armed forces soldiers got.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Wouldn't that information would be available at this by the pharmacist for the public, right? If they were injected at a pharmacy.
You get it on
injection. Yeah.
So they've wow, okay, didn't know that.
And when you think about it, here's why they don't want me to have the medical records, because those medical records are your best database to show just how much damage was done by the mRNA vaccines, because those CAF members, from the time they signed up, usually about 18, till the time they leave, all their medical care is within the Canadian Armed Forces system. You can't get a better data set for what their health was from when they signed up to when they were vaccinated and what happened afterwards. Because they can't go to, if they go to a civilian doctor or civilian medical service, they can be court-martialed for that, which is another reason why the whole VISIP thing shocked me, because they're not allowed to seek out anything medical outside of the system. So they wouldn't even think of doing that.
I'm not going to overplay this. This could be the biggest scandal in Canadian history. If they are not giving this information, denying the claims, giving the runaround, because they have clear documented evidence as to the percentage of the injury, the extent of the injury, the scope of the injuries, because like you mentioned, and I don't think many people appreciate this, these soldiers, men and women, go to medical doctors within the military, and they've had their charts from day one to present. And if it showed that 10% were getting whatever adverse events, and depending on when they knew it, and they continue to push it and continue to push it to this day, it could be exponential, limitless liability for the government.
Right. And I have military doctors who are very willing to testify that when they tried to report vaccine injuries, they were told not to. They were told we are not doing that, or we're not going to tell you how to report an injury. So the whole VARS system that we should be using, they didn't do it for the Canadian Armed Forces because the results were that bad.
Holy hell. Are there any doctor whistleblowers that have come out or willing to come out?
I do have doctors that are military doctors that are willing to come forward.
Willing, and at the risk of asking the absurd, do they have access to, or have they secured documentation or evidence?
They did. Yeah. As far as a million pages, Viva.
No, but this is, if you need, we've got Encryptus in the back who has an AI, who works with AI in terms of analyzing, summarizing massive amounts of documentation. Mm-hmm. This is absolutely flabbergasting and scandalous.
Yeah.
It's not just about denying the injuries.
On what basis are they denying the release of the information of the medical records, though, Catherine?
Privacy of the deceased.
Even so, is the estate trustee making the application?
Yep.
And they're not giving it to the estate trustee?
I'm sending them copies of the wills to say this person is the executor.
And they're saying privacy?
No, you can have it in 20 years.
Are they saying that
Are
they saying that to surviving victims as well?
Surviving spouses or surviving parents. Yes,
they are.
Catherine, for a claim, if they wanted to move that over for a claim of loss of companionship, the Vaccinator Support Program, don't they have to disclose? They have to forward the medical records there.
Yeah, but they can't get them.
Oh, they're not even cooperating with the VISP.
Nope.
Has any journalists reported on this?
They do not want those medical records.
That hurt, Dan. Has any I consider myself an analyst, not a journalist. This is because I don't think people would even understand.
That's crazy.
The extent. This is absolute pure corruption and pure cover-up.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
The non-deceased victims, like people who've suffered myocarditis or whatever, are they also being denied this information at their request?
Some of them have managed to walk into their medical units and get a copy of their charts.
A copy of their charts, which indicate the injury.
Yeah, before it got sent off to the archives, because if you're released, it goes to the archives. And some of them have managed to get access to their records that way.
Holy crab apples. Okay. So
But then
now
if the military doctor writes it off as something else,
it goes
so
on. It
I'll
goes
give you an
unreported.
example. So one of our special forces troops was in Africa, deployed in Africa with his unit. He had had one shot of Moderna. He was due for his second shot. They gave him the second shot in the field. His heart felt like it was exploding out of his chest, and they have fancy equipment. They slapped the heart monitor on him, and the reading they were getting out of it, the machine couldn't tell them what that heart pattern was. So they abandoned the mission, picked him up, and carried him to an American hospital base. And the doctor there said, "Oh, you just drank too many Red Bulls. You'll be fine." So that's what his chart says. Had too many Red Bulls.
We've heard of cases about that where they attribute the heart issues to other factors.
Yeah.
Which,
but then presumably after they say too many Red Bulls, they're not doing the limited knowledge I know. They're not doing troponin tests. They're not doing D-dimer tests to determine if they're.
I called the coroner's office, and when all these deaths were happening, I'm like, "Are these sudden deaths unexpected?" I'm like, "Is the coroner's office doing any inquiry whatsoever?" Nothing. I'm like, and they're right. So I didn't realize.
So the special forces guys were telling me that they were having the injections, and then guys were dropping in the parking lot 10 minutes later, and they were saying to him, "Well, it's not the Moderna, because if you were going to have a reaction, you would have had it inside."
You sign over all your rights in the military.
I see someone commented here, "You sign over all your rights in the military?" No, you don't.
No, I mean, I think he's saying as a criticism to this treatment, where they think.
Yeah. Well, people were told that, but I remind people that if you were charged with a criminal charge in the military, you get all your rights. You get a right to a lawyer. You get a right to silence. All those rights are still there.
Do we know if the Moderna was statistically more harmful than Pfizer?
Yes. And Denmark had already, and some other countries had already banned Moderna for young men by the time it was mandatory in the Canadian Armed Forces.
Just going to fact check in real time and see what that. Some European countries halted Moderna COVID-19, and this is from October 2021.
Yeah.
So you have now several hundred victims who have been denied at the VAC, sent to the VAC Veterans Affairs Commission, or I don't know what the C stands for. Then they go to VISP, Vaccine Injury Support Program. They're told no, either outright rejected for those who are still within the 3 years, or sorry, you're beyond your 3 years. You're definitely out of luck. And now you're going to sue at the federal level, or you have sued at the federal level for a mass tort. I presume it got dismissed at the first level. On what basis?
No basis to the claim. They said my statement of claim was nonsense and full of conspiracy theories.
If I may, do I want to ask? I don't want to ask the name of the judge because I'm not looking to dox, but who is the judge?
She had brought many cases. She had defended many cases against the Canadian Armed Forces before she was named to the bench, and she was named to the bench by the Liberal government. It's Justice Catherine Coughlin.
How old is she, give or take?
She's probably in early 50s. She had been an attorney general lawyer before she was appointed.
And was it on I presume it was on the Crown's motion to dismiss?
Yes.
Okay. And now you're appealing that?
Yes. Yeah.
What stage are we at for the appeal?
The appeal book is due the end of this month.
It's just unbelievable. It's fraud. It's basically like, yeah, I'll pay you. Whoops, you waited too long. I'm not paying you anymore. When they knew it. And then you go to, even if they could get a vaccine injury support program claim, it's capped at what are the natures of the injuries that we're dealing with?
Some are catastrophic. Like I said, some have had to have open heart surgery. Some have had aneurysm repairs. There's been strokes, life-changing strokes. The myocarditis, which we all know, we're coming up to 5 to 10 years. You're going to have massive problems if you've had myocarditis of any kind. We've got sarcoidosis.
What's sarcoidosis?
It's sort of degenerative. We've got Lou Gehrig's disease. You've got Everything that you see in the general public.
My brother had pointed out the last time he was on that he managed to get the Mayo Clinic. Which one was it? In Cleveland or Mayo?
Cleveland Clinic. Yeah.
Cleveland Clinic to update their what's the word when you give a prognosis on myocarditis?
Mhm.
Catherine, what is the prognosis now? The accepted prognosis on clinical myocarditis?
I'm not sure what the latest version of it is, but when I trained in cardiac ICU as a nurse, the outcome was poor. Usually you were going to die within 5 to 10 years after you've had myocarditis. That's what I was trained to
It
do.
really depends on severity and right.
It can.
And
Also, we're looking at a different type of myocarditis than the usual. That's the other factor here.
Right. And that's where the research is lacking, right?
Mhm.
And where we're still waiting for answers. So
Could you explain what you mean by that, or how you would describe the difference?
there were the follow-up studies for the young kids were being done at some hospitals, and there were some follow-up studies that they're still in progress. So in terms of
but we're talking viral myocarditis versus jab
right,
myocarditis,
vaccine related.
Yeah, because they were always that you could predictively say that it was the exact opposite of what they were saying, and that jab-induced myocarditis would actually be worse than infection-induced myocarditis, because they were telling you the exact opposite. No. The myocarditis you get from the jab is less severe than what you get from the infection. I had on, I forget which doctor now, but one doctor explained the whole thing to me. He's like, that makes no sense. When you have an infection, your entire body responds. When you get a myocarditis just from a jab, that's because it's activated one element to which your body's responding.
Mm-hmm.
So the notion would be that actual myocarditis and the consequences thereof would be worse when it's jab induced.
Yes.
Could be. They don't know. That's what requires further study, unquote.
Yeah. And when you think about it, the military 18 to 60 would be an ideal test group to look at what happened, which is why they don't want us to have those medical records.
I've got to pop off, but I'll let you guys finish the.
Go for it, Dan. Good to see you again.
Thanks for having me on.
I'll call you later.
Lion Advocacy on X. I have to
Lion Advocacy.
Give a follow
on X. He puts out good tweets, and they're clean, swear wordless.
Yeah. Sometimes I even rebuke Viva. So,
all right, go for it, Dan. See you soon, Catherine. Okay, so the status, at least for all the injured soldiers now, is you're going to submit everything for appeal. There's no there are no oral arguments for appeal. It's all written submissions.
I think this one will end up being oral arguments.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you don't have that date yet.
No.
And in the meantime, all of these servicemen and women who have been rendered incapacitated or debilitated, do they get not that it's any compensation whatsoever? Do they get pension? Are they left totally high and dry?
A lot of them have been left high and dry because they didn't serve long enough to have a pension. You have to serve 25 years in Canada to get pension.
So incapacitated, injured, denied,
with
and
young families support. Yeah, which is why they took it, because they couldn't afford to lose their job.
And now they are absolutely left without income, without the ability. Is there
completely abandoned, basically?
Is there any crowdsourcing to support these soldiers?
Nobody started a crowdsourcing, as far as I know, for them. They've been crowdsourcing to do the legal battle. Some of them have managed to get other claims approved by Veterans Affairs, like for PTSD from deployments, etc. So they managed to get a little bit of money, but yeah.
Well, I'll have to see what we can. I'll talk to you after we're off air, offline. Let me bring this up and just get Canadian Commando says they knew and they did it anyways. They were already at 90% when they mandated Viam envenimus. We will find a way. And Mike Freedom Honey says, my business partner was essentially placed on house arrest for 9 months after refusing the jab. Okay,
that's a soldier's story there. Yeah.
So this is what's going on with your clients. I haven't forgotten to ask any question about this particular case. I'm going to see if in our locals community, if anybody has any questions on this, but we're going to segue it. Actually, let me just double check here. Over in locals.
There is one question that was in chat that it didn't come up as a tip, but name is Jarhead310 asked, is it possible to even win this lawsuit in Canada?
Good question. We're going to keep trying until we try to win, until we come up with a win. There's been a few small wins lately.
So, well, as in recent court rulings in other cases, like with Randy Hillier?
Yeah, and another one in veteran one, Thomas versus Canada, where the court ruled that the grievance system is not appropriate for dealing with charter issues, and Payne versus Canada said the same thing. So we're chipping away. It's a big wall, but we keep going, and we'll keep trying.
Jacob Castro says, people walking around today glad things are, quote, back to normal, ignoring that as long as no one's been arrested, we're begging for it to happen again. Forget the arrested. It's not back to normal for hundreds, thousands, and probably more people.
Mm-hmm.
The question that I was just going to ask. Oh, no, in response to that question, Encryptus, to me, it's an absolute no-brainer. It's borderline fraud in what the VA did.
Yeah.
Fraudulent inducement to think that you're being dealt with when they were actually fraudulently inducing you to allow the statute of limitations or prescription period to lapse.
Yeah, exactly.
The problem is fraud, because it's a cover-up of a crime against humanity for which that, those little Weasley bastards, Anthony Housefather, the Liberal Party, to a certain extent, the Conservatives, and to a certain extent, the NDP, were complicit, if orchestrators, of this, what I believe to be a crime against humanity.
Mm-hmm. Well, all the generals that got removed, I could easily lay the timeline out for you, Viva, and show that the generals who tried to stop it were pushed out under sexual misconduct allegations.
Are there any names that you can name publicly?
Yeah, absolutely. So General Vance was Chief of Defense Staff when they first tried to bring this in. He said, no, you're not going to experiment on my people. And if there's something wrong, you're going to destroy my military. Sexual misconduct. They brought in Admiral Art McDonald.
Let me stop you on that one. What's his first name?
Jonathan Vance was the first one.
Jonathan Vance, sexual misconduct.
Yep.
Untarnished record up until that point?
Yeah, and what the sexual misconduct was for a woman he'd been having an affair with for decades. That was no secret.
Okay.
Yep. And then we do bring in Admiral Art McDonald. I've got his briefing note. They said, you cannot do this. It's illegal. It's not a lawful order. He said, pound salt, I'm not bringing in a mandate. Sexual misconduct that he was cleared for. And then they brought in Acting Chief of Defense Staff Wayne Eyre, and I've got the briefing note to him from General Cadieux. And General Cadieux says, you can't do this. It's illegal. Nope, you can't do it. General Cadieux, sexual misconduct that never came to be. Danny Fortin, he was a general that was in charge of the civilian rollout of the COVID vaccine in Canada. He said, no, we can't mandate that. That's illegal. Sexual misconduct that he was cleared of. And then General Stephen Whalen, he was in charge of HR for the military, and he said, you're destroying the military. Sexual misconduct allegations. When it came time for General Eyre to get on the stand and the person accusing him to get on the stand in his court-martial, they withdrew the charges.
This is... Yeah. What would it take? Like, what would it take to actually just blow this open and to definitively prove what is patently obvious? Like, you would need internal correspondence, which you haven't been able to get through ATIP.
Oh, no, that stuff I have.
How many pages do you have?
I have 1 million pages of corruption in the Canadian Armed Forces right now.
Have you been able to effectively or meaningfully go through it?
Oh, yeah. I've got now, one thing veterans are really, really good at is knowing the system and knowing what to look for. We've taken, the Office of the Information Commissioner has taken DND or the Department of National Defense to court many times because they've come back and said, we don't have any records. And I've got the people saying, no, I wrote emails. Where are my emails? So there we go.
And you don't have any, like, I say not smoking gun, but what is the smokingest of the guns that you have? And is it public yet?
The smokingest of the guns, I would have to say, is that the briefing notes that say you can't do this. And then we also have that the public, they said they based it on the advice of Public Health Canada. And we actually have the documents from Public Health Canada that show that was based on a draft from Public Health Canada. And in that draft, we've got their notes on that draft where they say you can't use safe and effective for this because no vaccine is safe. And then they acknowledge myocarditis, Lou Gehrig's disease, et cetera, are happening with these vaccines.
And you do not have the complete breakdown of the stats analysis of injuries within the military.
Not yet, no.
Okay,
Because I don't have the medical records to back it up.
Yeah, that to me would be probably the smoking gun, at least of the objective metrics. And now this
Well,
is
whatever you've been a litigation lawyer. Whatever they try to hide the hardest is usually what they don't want out.
I was
They're
involved.
finding discovery like you would not believe.
I can absolutely imagine. I'm sure they've signed all their NDAs, and I'm sure they're shredding and bleach bidding whatever they can.
Yeah.
I'm going to get some questions in for those who might have them, but this is going to segue into when I spoke with you earlier. I was like, you know, how many of your clients who are suffering through illness now have been offered MAIDs? I sort of asked medical assistance in dying because I sort of asked as a sick, not even a joke, the sick state of Canadian politics where they've literally been offering not physically ill soldiers, but those with PTSD MAIDs. Have any of your clients mentioned that they've been offered MAIDs by Veterans Affairs?
Well, I brought the first lawsuit against Veterans Affairs for it. It is for a 24-year-old veteran with no physical problems at all, but he's suffering quite severe PTSD. He had 4 suicide attempts on his own. His uncle and his dad were veterans, said reach out to Veterans Affairs, get some help. And on his very first phone call to Veterans Affairs, he was offered MAID as the first option.
Did he record the conversation?
Unfortunately, no. And they're saying it didn't happen. And I'm getting the response back from the Crown is that no, that we don't have a policy that doesn't happen.
Do they not
today that there's another one that's been offered?
Do they not record the conversations for quality control on the government's end, or?
Well, apparently they didn't that time, Viva.
Holy hell! So they all. I mean, this is. I mean, I've heard countless stories. Maybe not countless, but dozens of stories of people who are ill. I mean, Kayla Pollock. They offered it to her 3 times unsolicited.
Yeah.
So
I have a friend of mine that they were willing to give him MAID for PTSD.
These are the soldiers. These are the
veterans. Yep.
What's the nature?
Well, I'm going to say it, Viva. A dead soldier, a dead veteran is cheaper than a live one.
It's I've mentioned it a number of times on the channel. It's the principle of Canadian politics. Maybe even internationally, legally speaking, it's cheaper to kill someone than it is to pay for their lifelong injuries. And so
yes, yeah, especially when you look at this one veteran, mental health issues for life, and he's 24 years old. They're looking at paying him for 50 years.
Oh my goodness. I think we might have some questions here. I'm going to come back to this. So what is the nature of the lawsuit? Like what is the basis of the claim?
The basis of the claim is that they were negligent and that there was some misfeasance of public office by offering to commit murder. Because under the criminal code, it's still illegal to counsel suicide. So.
So like sort of like intentional infliction of emotional distress.
Intentional infliction, yeah, the whole works. And VAC just says it never happened.
Well, Trudeau has admitted that it's happened on certain occasions.
Yeah, I would like to hear from more veterans who've been offered. Even if they don't want to pursue a lawsuit, I would like to have them swear an affidavit for me, because that would help out this guy who's leading the charge. Full credit to him. With all his issues, he was still willing to step up and say, no, this isn't right. Somebody has to fight this. So
you're doing this 24/7, 7 days a week.
Yes.
Do you have are you a solo practitioner? Do you have, is it crowdsourcing the assistance?
Yes, we're doing crowdsourcing. I have a nonprofit. It's the valorlegalactioncenter.org, and Valor with a U for the Canadian spelling. I don't charge for my services to these military members and veterans. All my work for them is pro bono, because I have my private practice that I earn a living with, just because I believe in the cause. I wish there was no need for me at all. I wish the Canadian Armed Forces and Veterans Affairs treated their people the way they should. Even if they would just follow their own policy, I'd be happy.
I'm going to go into our locals community and see if there's any specific questions that I might have missed. Encryptus says from an account that is shoveling SH1T, Viva, is this woman protected? Have you received any political IRS backlash? IRS. Have you been audited? Have you noticed any anomalies in your daily life, professional or personal, that you might think related?
No, surprisingly not. And I thank Ezra Levant from Rebel News for that, because he taught the Law Society of Alberta a lesson that if you push somebody out of the profession, you lose control of them. So right now, because I'm still licensed, they still have some control. But if I'm not licensed anymore, I got a million pages of corruption I can expose. So there's that. But I also happen to have a fantastic team of specialized people with special skills to keep me protected if I need it.
I'm picturing Liam Neeson right now. There's a question here. It says from Garvin. Why have none of these generals gone public? This is the first time hearing that anyone in authority stood up. I don't think, well, at the risk of saying maybe it's not true, how many of them have gone overtly public? Like, and where do they go public?
Yeah, overtly public. Stephen Whalen has been very vocal, and Danny Fortin was quite vocal until they settled his lawsuit, and probably have an NDA. But I would suspect that when their NDAs expire in 2 to 3 years, you're going to hear more.
Yeah, and they're not willing. I don't know what the penalties would be for breaking an NDA, but I mean, there might be military. It's amazing.
Well, they can only bring them back. So the Canadian military is a little bit different. You can only be brought back for service-related charges a year after you're retired. So there's also that factor. Some of these generals have just retired, so they can't. They can't say anything, or they risk being charged for a court-martial. So, in the U.S., they can bring them back in and charge them, but Canada's a little bit different.
Encryptus wants to know if your phone gets hot when it's just sitting there unused.
Oh, yes. we on regular basis, my staff and I joke around of like, has anybody said hello to CFNIS, which is the Military Investigation Service, or the Canadian Investigation Service? Everybody say hi to them.
What is the status of the claim for the IIED for the veteran who was offered MAIDs?
Interestingly enough, the Crown is playing a real delay game. I'm still kind of waiting for documents. They haven't brought a motion to dismiss. I think they want to keep this quiet because it is election season, is my opinion.
At the risk of asking the obvious stupid question, has anyone from the Conservative Party reached out to you in order to put your story on blast?
They haven't offered to put the story on blast, although the couple of the Conservative MPs have been working with us for some of our disclosures. But I mean, they could take it to committee, they can, that sort of thing. But as opposition, they weren't really in a position. Although one of my clients has spoken and has a tape recording of the conversation with Pierre Poilievre, who says that this is all going to get looked into when the Conservatives come to power. It's an election promise. We'll see.
Which Conservative MP was it? Roman Baber?
Roman has made a few comments. It was James Bezan.
Okay.
And Cathay Whitnall from Saskatchewan as well.
This is it's depressing and enraging because this is a massive cover up.
It is. The Canadian Armed Forces is, well, we have about 15,000 people that we could actually use to defend Canada right now.
Well, so I had brought up,
when they said defend the border, I'm like, with who?
I brought up the comment earlier. It was from oh crap, I'm going to forget the name. Where he said it's 30,000 active service members. Is it in fact as low as 15,000?
It's 15. It's 15.
Does that include
all services? That's Air Force, Army, and Navy.
Does that include the Chinese soldiers that we're training on
No,
Canadian?
there's extra of those.
Holy sweet merciful goodness!
There was in May a couple of years ago on a Friday afternoon, we had 3 jets with crew, with a pilot, with an air crew, and a plane that worked to defend our entire country.
15,000. And what's that down from? What was it at its peak?
So at its peak, it was about 98,000. And then it kind of settled down to 63 to 65, which is where we were in 2021.
Okay, I'm sorry. So that's been a precipitous drop off in the last 3 years.
Yeah. So between the whole COVID madness and the hardcore DEI agenda,
It's been
we don't have enough. If we did a draft, we don't have enough experienced non-commissioned people to train the new people. That's where we're at, because they gutted all the guys with combat experience, the guys that train. Admirals and generals don't train new soldiers. That's up to, master corporals, sergeants, warrant officers, a few captains, and they're all gone. They're gone, and they're not coming back.
Just going to look up a word before I read a tweet. I don't know what this word means. At the risk of getting in trouble, I'm going to bring up a chat. It was Rumble rants here because there's some questions that people have. Let me see. Do we see this? Okay. How many païts? Is that I don't know what that word means, and I think it's probably are in Canada by now. The internet seems to be doing payees, and I don't think that's what you mean, Zionist cuck, based on the name. I'll see what the chat. Tell me what that word means. I think it might mean foreigner, if I'm not mistaken. Schmickel says the veteran may not have it recorded, but he has his own phone history to show the call at least happened.
The phone company is giving us grief on trying to get our access to that. His own phone records. Yeah.
King of Biltong, this is not a sponsor, but he is always here and he makes great stuff. It says Biltong is a non-MMR vaccine combating vegetarian and vegan viruses. It's a peer-reviewed and has been tested extensively for centuries. Biltong USA, code VIVA for 10% off. Unfortunately, it's not available in Canada, or I don't think you can send the meat cross-border. Schmickel says, Viva, the Remanded has dropped another article on the poly market and Canadian election. They deep dive if the whole poly market is just manipulation or foreign interference for the public to consume. And that's it. Catherine, I don't know. Is there anything that you wanted to mention that I should have asked that I didn't think to ask?
No, I think we covered a lot. There's a lot of information. I think we touched on it.
I'm flabbergasted that we went from 60 some odd thousand to 15 in 4 years and down from an all-time high, rounded up to 100,000. Canada's a sitting duck.
Oh, and we have been since 2021. We lost 10% of our military in a month in late 2021. And any business that loses 10% of its trained workforce that fast is bankrupt.
Do we know why we lost them? Was it injury,
well, in
health?
2021, it was because of the vaccine, the whole COVID thing.
Can you imagine the national security threat they've created through this mandate of this experimental jibby jab?
Yeah, and General Vance told them that was going to happen. He said, no, I won't do this because what happened is going to happen. But Jody Thomas stood in his office and told him that he was going to have to do this, that the Canadian Armed Forces were going to lead by example for the Canadian population. And he's like, that's not what they're there for. He stood up to her. Catherine, I've got this from someone who was in the office, so I know it's true.
Do you have another 15 minutes?
I'm getting tight on time.
No. So go. So I'm going to go to our locals community. I'm going to call you afterwards because I want to give my number to a few of these people.
Mm-hmm. I've got a whole group of people that are happy to talk.
Okay, and I'll speak with Jacob Wells at Give Send Go, and we'll see if we can't set up something of a crowdfunding for the aggregate health issues, or you know what I mean, like monies to survive, not monies to pursue legal. Not to put more work on whoever's plate would manage that, but we'll see what we can do with that. So I'll call you afterwards, and we'll figure this out. Catherine, what's your Twitter handle? Is Valor
at Valor Legal? So
at Valor Legal.
Yeah, VALOUR, and then legal.
Okay.
You'll see me trolling the Chief of Defense Staff regularly.
Okay, amazing. Well, okay, I'm glad we met. I'll call you later. We'll talk more about this, and we'll figure out what can be done. And everybody now knows, and everybody snip, clip, share away. But Catherine, thank you very much. I'm gonna continue live.
Thank you, and thank you for having me on to tell their stories.
Anytime, and we'll come back for updates.
All right, take care.
Have a good one.